Hello, I'm Camilo, and today I'll look into Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. This novel follows the relationship of the people belonging to two manors, Wuthering Heights, hence the title, and Thrushcross Grange. For the inhabitants of Wuthering Heights, we have Heathcliff, Catherine, and Hindley, whereas for Thrushcross Grange, we have Edgar and Isabella. As I said, uh, this story revolves around the relationships of these characters. A story filled with drama, love, and a quest for revenge. Thus, in this video, I'll tackle the subject matters of social class, love, and revenge, and how they can be seen through the characters of the novel, and also the influences of Romanticism and the Victorian era present in the book. Let us begin. Social class. Okay, so social class plays an important role in the novel. The clearest example lies in the two manors. On one hand, Wuthering Heights looks gloomy and overall grim. Thrushcross Grange is surrounded by trees and very well kept. The imageries for both of them seem to directly clash, being the latter a representation of high class. For love, there's an important distinction regarding its perception. That is to say, we have both romantic love and political love, which can be seen through marriages. I'll go into that in a little bit. Lastly, revenge. Revenge seems to be one of the factors that moves the plot onwards. Sufficient to say, all of these topics are quite tightly intertwined, and now we'll see how these points are present in the characters. How they are present in the characters. First, love and social class. When Heathcliff is adopted and brought to Wuthering Heights, his father neglects his other children and is much more affectionate with him. This causes the other children, Catherine and Hindley, to abuse Heathcliff as a manner of retaliation for the situation. Then, when they grow up, Catherine is in love with Heathcliff, but due to years of abuse and neglect towards him after their father died, she can't marry Heathcliff because it would be beneath her to do so with someone so lowly and someone that pretty much looks like a servant. This is because Catherine spent some time in Thrushcross Grange and turned from something like a savage girl into a fine lady. So her status became a concern. Instead, she marries Edgar, who belongs to the high society. This arrangement prioritizes social class over true love. Now, on the note of marriage, we can see bonds for ulterior motives with Heathcliff and Isabella, Kathy, the daughter of Catherine, and I refer to her as such to make the distinction, Kathy and Linton, and Catherine with Edgar. Heathcliff wanted to get back at Edgar through Isabella. Kathy is forced to marry Linton, so Heathcliff can be the owner of Thrushcross Grange, and Catherine marries Edgar for social status, despite her heart belonging to Heathcliff. But the last marriage, the one between Hareton and Kathy, is based on true love, rather than something else. That they fall in love once Kathy begins teaching Hareton how to read. Ergo, social class and the kind of love plays a substantial role on all of these characters. In a certain way, they seem to be the wheel that puts in motion the plot of the novel, which leads us to the next point, revenge. Due to the unrequited love that cannot be consummated through marriage and all of the abuse Heathcliff suffered throughout his life, he starts his quest for revenge on those who have wronged him. He marries Isabella and abuses her to start getting control of Threshold Grange. He takes care of Hatton, but just as a way of acquiring Wuthering Heights, and also abuses and neglects him. Then he locks up Catherine's daughter and forces Linton to marry her, thus securing ownership of Thrushcross Grange. All this is a direct parallelism of how he has been treated. He responds violence with violence, and ends up making everyone around him miserable, even himself, because since Catherine's death, he's been haunted by her ghost. Ultimately, his quest for revenge brought his own demise and misery. Moving on, this novel has influences of both Romanticism and the Victorian era. For the Romanticism, we can see a bit of a focus on nature. For example, the weather at the very beginning of the novel is something to be respected and has direct influence on the journey of Mr. Lockwood, that he stays on the house because he doesn't want to go out on the fields because there's a huge nasty mist outside. Then there's a dog that bites him when he dismissed the warning of not getting close to them. And if he hadn't stayed for these reasons, he wouldn't have had that meeting with Catherine Ghost. So yeah, this too is an influence of Romanticism, the mystical and the unknown, and letting go your imagination, contrasted with the Victorian point of view of realism. Now, diving into the Victorian influence, we have the role of women, for example, in the society. In the novel, women take care of the house and have no real say on material property. When they marry, everything goes to the husband. We can see that in the reasons of why Heathcliff married Isabella, or why he forced Linton to marry Cathy. The property that should belong to the women went to the men instead upon marriage. So yeah. Then social inequality. Once again, the models show this, as I've mentioned previously, the direct contrast between Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange. Not only that, but there's disdain towards the lower classes. Remember that Catherine didn't marry Heathcliff because of this very reason, because Heathcliff looked like he belonged to the lower class, whereas she kind of belonged to the higher class after spending some time in Thrushcross Grange. And finally, the tone of the novel is quite grim and tragic. It's filled with misery, death, and abuse. The Victorians had this type of vision towards society, very pessimistic. It's reflected on the very tragic and sad lives of almost all the main characters. However, at the end of the novel, there's a bit of subversion of this trope, because the book ends with Cathy and Hareton finally free from the clutches of Heathcliff, which pretty much insinuates they live happily ever after ending. Last but not least, would I recommend this book? Well, if you like a story filled with drama and tragedy, complicated relationships that you must draw a map to understand, or was it just me? And seeing someone descending into madness for the loss of a loved one, alongside his quest for revenge, pretty much like a soap opera style, then yeah, this novel is perfect for you. Besides, the narrative compels you to keep reading its pages. So yeah, I would recommend it. That would be all.